Order our regular session of July 10, 2018. First order of business we have this evening, we have the opening prayer and pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas, led by Councilmember Kaiser. If you all please join me in standing. Dr. Kaiser?
Thank you. Lord, we pray that you guide us in making decisions that are right and just for the citizens, the employees, the residents and businesses of Schertz. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Dr. Kaiser. First thing that we have up this evening, we have several employee recognitions. First one we have with the IT department.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Those of you who regularly attend Council know that all of the new employees really love this part of their early job. They often apply in the hopes that, well, I get to stand up in front of Council and talk and be seen. Or maybe not the case. They'd rather work in the background. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Mark Welch, Client Services Tech 2 in our IT department. Miles is out, so I was asked to do the job of introducing him to you. He really provides all of that support for things. So when our computers and whatnot don't work, he's the guy that sits down. So you can imagine for him to do that job well, particularly with me, it requires the patience of a saint to be able to walk through and kind of go through that. But make sure that we do all the updates and changes and things like that. And again, I will say that, particularly as of late, some of the things that we've read in the media about, virus attacks and things on other communities in the area, the security of our IT system is all the more important, and that's driven home. And so the fact that we've got folks who are working on that, making sure that everything is up to date and working is all the more critical. But he's not just starting out in IT. He's got experience over 20 years. Building computers, websites, and networks, worked for Lockheed Martin for 12 years, was assigned to Randolph Air Force Base and the Air Force Personnel Center in the IT department in there, started in his entry-level position and kind of worked his way up. He was also a police officer for about 10 years, and you find IT less dangerous or more so than PD work. Worked for the city of Kirby and the Bexar County District Attorney Office. He was a medic and a fireman for the city of Kirby for several years as well, and a recovery diver for the San Marcos area recovery team. He has 6 children and 5 grandchildren. All live in San Antonio area except 2 kids. One lives in North Texas and one in New York. Unfortunately, his wife was just diagnosed with cancer recently, had immediate brain surgery to deal with some tumors. So certainly part of what you come to work for Schertz for is that we are a family here, and so certainly our thoughts and our prayers and our support go out to her and you guys as well. Likes to take his family in terms of fun facts to the ocean for vacations and the lake for daily trips, and obviously doing a lot of things with his wife and family. So welcome aboard. Thank you.
Well, welcome, and while we don't require new employees to have a shot at the microphone, if you wish, it's yours.
I just want to say I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to have a job here in Schertz. I live in Universal City, so it's close. It is home for me, so I'm just very happy to be here.
Well, welcome. We're very happy to have you with us and hope you have a long career with us.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, next up this evening we have the library.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. James. Tonight, I'm very happy to introduce you to our newest part-time library circulation clerk, Julio Machado. Julio grew up in San Diego, California, and graduated from San Diego State University in 1996. He has worked the majority of his professional career in public libraries, with the exception of one position that he held in an academic library at the University of California, San Diego campus. Julio was a former employee at the City of Schertz Public Library in 2009 when the new library first opened. He has since returned to Texas and is very excited to once again be part of our library team. Julio is the proud father of 2 children, a daughter and a son. Julio, his son, is traveling with DCI Drum Corps International this summer, teaching drumline, and he hopes to see his performance in a couple weeks at the Alamo Dome. In his spare time, Julio enjoys running, biking, hiking, traveling, visiting national parks, and photography. Welcome back, Julio.
Good evening and welcome. Like a chance of the microphones, yours if you wish.
I'm just honored to be back. You guys have a fantastic library, beautiful and an amazing library team. So I'm glad to be back. Yeah.
Wonderful. We're glad to have you back. Glad you're joining us. All right, next up, Parks and Recreation.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. James, City Council, I'm proud to introduce you to a young fellow named Maxwell Worley. He's a recent graduate from Clemens. He placed second in a state cooking competition for Texas. He's going to school in the fall at Northeast Lakeview, majoring in business, and his favorite animal is a wolf. We're really proud to have him, and he's a really great worker, and he's going to grow up to be a really strong worker.
Very good. Well, again, opportunity at the microphone if you wish.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to work for y'all and represent the city and the public. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very happy to have you with us, and hope you have a long career as well. And Public Affairs.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Joining the Public Affairs team is Cassandra Cassie Michaels. Ms. Cassie has lived and grown up here in Schertz, and she lived here until she went off to go to the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor, where she got her degree in psychology. While in college, she worked for the City of Temple Parks and Recreation Department and managed an after-school site along with the summer day camps. Her love for recreation and youth development shaped the beginnings of her career, where she worked as a year-round outdoor education and summer camp director for Girl Scouts of Central Texas, Camp Test Lake, the Young Men's Business League, and Austin Sunshine Camp, which is a camp for at-risk youth and children in the foster care system. Most recently, she comes to us from Yeti Coolers, where she worked in the customer engagement and social media and was a team lead for their staff development. Her core belief is that true success comes from service to others and plans to live that truth as the new event specialist for the City of Schertz. We introduced her directly to our events this last week with Jubilee, and she came in and just rolled right along with us. We're glad to have her as part of our team.
Very good. Microphone is yours.
Hello. I just want to say thanks for coming out to the events and having your support as we plan them. I, like she said, grew up here in Schertz. My family was really close with Mr. Hal Baldwin, and I was very involved with the community here, with BBYA and things like that. So I'm very excited to give back and be in this position and be able to give back. So thank you.
Wonderful. It's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. All right, next up this evening, we have a presentation and update regarding Fire Station number 3. Mr. Waite.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. Just want to introduce Phil Godrow. He's our owner's rep in the construction project of the fire station. He's here to give us an update on where we are, price-wise, budget-wise, building-wise.
Very good. Mr. Godrow.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, council. Too much iPad. Okay. We'll try this. Good evening. I wanted to give you a quick update on where we stand on fire station number 3. We've been working on it a while, and we are absolutely coming down the home stretch. So we will see how this works. A little bit of the background. We had the bonds back in 15, and in 17 we engaged both the design entity and the construction manager at risk entity. We've been working with both of those firms to get us to where we are today. Kind of reiterates what I said. This is the location. That's Lower Seguin, 1518 there. The pin is approximate location of fire station number 3. That's the actual site plan. In and out, it's on the right and the left. That's a little bit busy, but you can see the outline of the building by the bare spots there, and we'll help you walk through that. There's an exterior elevation, pretty much colors true. We've changed a couple of materials for monetary reasons to get it back into the budget, but they are minute and hardly noticeable in the finished product. That's essentially what the floor plan looks like. Lower left is the community room. It's about 1,100 square feet. You see the bays on the right with the engines, and then the center, of course, is the core operation of the building. The building is designed ultimately for joint use by both fire and EMS. I guess initially it'll be fire. It's just short of 14,000 square feet, including the 1,100 square feet of community space. The latest price that we have is $6,513,622. The target was $6,500. We continue to work with the teams to try to meet that. We have a couple of the GMP estimates that we questioned. They'll get back to us as soon as they can, probably end of this week, maybe the beginning of next week. There may be some savings there. I don't expect an increase at this point, but that's probably the kiss of death. So we'll see what the numbers are. Currently, we anticipate returning the end of July. I guess it would now be the first week in August, first meeting in August. To confirm those numbers, we should have an amendment prepared for council, and we would then be looking for approval of that amendment. And the amendment would be for the current contract with the CM at risk, which is for pre-construction pricing. So this would be an amendment to that. That would incorporate and kick off the construction portion of the contract. As I said, we're continuing to refine the scope, and we're working with Byrne to refine the costs, and we will continue to do that. If we meet our August 1 date, we're looking at a July 19th completion. And that's pretty much it. I'll certainly try to answer any questions you might have.
Very good. Council, questions on this one? This side. Mr. Davis.
The 6.5 mil, is that just the construction of the building itself?
Yes, sir.
Not including the land acquisition or the geotech or anything else?
No, sir. It's 6.5 out of the $8 million. The $8 million paid for land purchases and other soft costs, design fees, those things.
Maybe this would help, Phil, if I may preemptive. Councilman Davis, the other costs that we have, land acquisition, architecture fees, your services, geotech, et cetera, FF&E, how much do we anticipate that to be at this point?
It's looking like right around $2 million.
So to be clear for council, the bond was $8 million. We are relying on the developers, the TERS developers' funds to be able to meet the project. What we're recommending is that funds that we have in excess, so once we get in, once we find any change orders and things like that, that we would use that the additional bond funds that are left over to essentially for a fire truck, fire engine going forward. And so again, as you know, we have a lot of need. So we don't want to repay that. We have a use for it. So the developer's money will all be kicked in. We'll build the station, build a truck as well, but we'll make that decision once we get into the project far enough and know the amount.
Anyone else? Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, I was reading through the package, and it said further down the line that you will be able to, or think about accommodating some EMS functions out of there and Public Works. I was wondering, police department substation, is anything anticipated?
It has not been part of this program.
And not a substation, i.e. where officers would go to report to work and go out and patrol the community. What has been built in, just like it was at Fire Station 2, is a place for the officers to go to do reports, interview a citizen, do that type of thing, so that they don't have to come all the way back up here. So there's a conference room meeting area that would be available to law enforcement. For that.
And that's been coordinated with the police department?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all I have, sir.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, it appears not. Appreciate this. Thank you for the update, and we look forward to the continued effort toward completion.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, next up this evening, I have city events and announcements. First, we have announcements of upcoming city events.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
So we have a couple of announcements tonight. First is going to be on Tuesday, July 17th. There's going to be out at Crescent Bend, a birding walk from 7:30 to 10:30 in the morning. The chamber luncheon is also going to be that same day at 11:30 a.m. Over at the Civic Center. And that evening, there is not going to be a council meeting tonight, or that evening on the 17th. On Saturday, July 21st, at Schertz Public Library, there's going to be a free early childhood vision screening at 1 o'clock. And the Schertz Civil Alliance Club is sponsoring a free early childhood vision screening program for children ages 1 to 4 to screen, identify, and hopefully address vision abnormalities before the young children attend school. On that same day, the 21st, there's going to be the movies in the park at 6 p.m. This will be over at the Schertz Aquatic Center, and they're going to be screening the classic movie Jaws. It will start at 7:30 p.m. and is free to the public. There will be concessions available for purchase. There is limited capacity available, so registration is required, and it's over at the YMCA's website. And on Tuesday, July 24th, we'll be back here at 6 p.m. for the City Council meeting. And also, filing for Schertz City Council for the November 6, 2018 election begins July 23rd. And the candidate packet is available in the City Secretary's office, or it can be found online at schertz.com. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have announcements and recognitions by the acting city manager, Mr. James.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. One, thank you to all the staff who were out at the 4th of July event. As you know, the last half of it got rained out, but we had a lot of staff standing around in the rain ready to put the event on if we felt it was safe and appropriate. So thanks for their efforts. And then the next thing, and I try to remember to do this at the front of the meeting, for folks who may watch the video later, we do provide some information packets to council or information items. One of those has to do with recent bond rating reports. The next is an update on the activities of the Committee Advisory Board and all the city's boards and commissions. We also do a monthly update of the large projects and capital improvements projects. You may note that our electronic sign is up and running and working, which is positive. And then we also provide a list of pending informational items that council's requested.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Just again, a reminder, we just said so, but no meeting next week as it's the third Tuesday of the month, and do want to thank all the staff for the work that was done on the 4th, and unfortunately with the weather we had some challenges, but my understanding is the fireworks that we did not get to see on the 4th we have reserved and will make use of in celebration of the city's 60th birthday in September, so we'll get an opportunity to see them just the same. All right, that said, next we have hearing of residents, and first up this evening, Mr. Bolter.
Brent Bolter, 2633 Cloverbrook Lane.
Oh, she already has that from all my other times, I'm sure. Mr. Mayor, Council, Acting City Manager, City Attorney. I didn't miss anybody. Okay, cool. Just three things I want to speak to tonight. First one is in relationship to workshop item number 2. Watching the Cibolo Council meeting, last meeting, hearing the residents, quite a few folks stepped up and were not big fans of the pending agreement, as I indicated last time I spoke, what I saw on social media. So throwing that out again, just for your information. And just on a personal note, I know some of you have already spoken in the past about not giving up any assets that the city have. I fully support that idea. I know that there's a big push from the Cibolo side to gain control of the road. They've spoken about it, so I know some of you have spoken to we need to hang on to our assets, and I just wanted to say I agree with that point of view. Item number 2, your closed session tonight, item number 14. I was glad to see that on the agenda. My only statement that I want to make in regards to that is there's rules to follow, and when folks don't follow those rules, I think there should be repercussions to that. So enough said, at least for me. Number 3, just to make sure that you guys are still tracking this item. Many people have spoken before in regards to what I call the firing of John Kessel, what others say was a resignation, whatever, but from my standpoint, he was fired. There was requests made that there be an accounting of the expenses related to that situation. What I would put forward tonight, I'm more than happy to wait until such time that a new city manager is actually hired. At that time, you'll have an ability to then state clearly what the expenses were relating to Mr. Kessel's firing. I think that it's necessary to provide that information to the citizens. I know it's been asked for before, and I think when a new city manager comes on board, you'll be able to make a full accounting of what the expenses were. And granted, in the column of no longer an expense was Mr. Kessel's salary, but on the side of expenses that the city had impact us, his severance package, not any aspersions on Mr. James, but whatever money was increased for him due to his increased responsibilities, I think would be an expense related to that. Otherwise, his salary would have stayed the same, probably, and anything else associated with that. So I just want you to know that we're still tracking it, at least some of the citizens, and we're still waiting for that final accounting to be done. And I think when the new city manager comes on board, you'll be able to provide those numbers. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Next up, Dr. Paczynski.
Good evening, Mayor Carpenter, Schertz City Council members. I'm Dr. Irene Paczynski, 1117 Twin Lane here in Schertz. I've been a very happy resident for the past 31 years and taxpayer for the past 31 years. And so just want to say that I have appreciated my years here and what we have had in our community. With that said, I'm going to give my opinion on the agenda item, closed session, number 14. It's very important, the reputation of our community. Subcommittees, city council committees that we've had, planning and zoning, economic development, those are very important to the reputation of this community. In my opinion, it's incumbent on each one of you to take seriously appointments made to those committees, especially economic development at this point, to attract customers, customers too, but also companies to come here. They look very closely at the people that they deal with in city positions and on these committees. before they make a commitment to coming here. And in my opinion, I appreciate the council person who took this very seriously and, in my opinion, again, prevented a situation from being revisited that came down on us almost a year ago. Again, I've been a resident for 31 years, positive. We need to, again, very important to assign people to these committees that bring positive reputations and integrity to these committees because they do represent the city of Schertz. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, Mrs. Titterington.
Good evening, Council. I know that Sarah had made reference to our chamber luncheon next week, but she did not mention that our mayor will be the keynote speaker for our graduating leadership core class. And we are very much looking forward to that, thoughts on leadership. And even though our class was just a little bit smaller this year, they were very avid students. They got so much they're still talking about, and I know Mr. James probably doesn't like me to call it a mock city council meeting, but the mock city council meeting that they were able to do and discuss issues and find out exactly what you all go through when you're sitting up there, that it is not cut and dry, that there are several issues, there's hearing of residents, there's, you know, city staff, so they really got a lot out of this session, so we're looking forward to that, Mayor. Also, I wanted to, and I did not see him here, I wanted to recognize Bryce Cox. He has been instrumental in helping one of our members, Casa Verde Farms, along with getting some direction and help from Mr. James. They were having some areas that they needed to get better communication on so that they could finish building. And they're very excited to be in Schertz. They're moving from San Antonio to, I believe it's right off around 482, almost towards New Braunfels, but they have a large area of land. They're going to bring their wholesale landscaping facility here, and they're just very excited. And there were just some issues that had come up. And again, thank you to the good communication, for the staff being so proactive and getting in there and having the meetings. So just wanted to give a shout out. It was really, really good. And the last thing that I wanted to bring up is I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, as well as Mr. James, too, for coming out. We had a plaque presentation for a Cibolo member who is a home-based business, and then we actually had a groundbreaking for another business that is expanding from Universal City into Cibolo, and that's the main thing that we're trying to do here is we're building community between Cibolo, Selma, and Schertz. And I already know there's relationships that are going on with water and other things going on, Reederstein Road, and it just says a lot about our city when the council and the governments come together to support other businesses, whether it's in our city or not. And both entities really appreciated that, and they kept expressing that to me over and over again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up, Mr. Eldridge.
Council, my name is Dana Eldridge, 2628 Gallant Fox Drive, Schertz, Texas. In the flyer that were handed out with the meeting minutes, it says, all remarks shall be addressed to the council as a body and not to any individual member thereof. Any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks while addressing the council may be requested to leave the meeting. About 3 weeks ago, or 3 meetings ago, I got up here. I was very upset. I have no problem with council not agreeing with somebody to be put on a committee. It's not the problem. Problem when it goes past that and very offensive things, my opinion, being said about that individual from things that happened over a year ago. I see item 14, that something's going to be discussed in closed session, so I'm going to wait until 14A comes about back in open session to see what comes of it. But I want council, the whole body of council, to understand that I'm still offended by what was said and by what was being allowed to be said, not just by one person, but evidently the council agreed that it was okay for it to be said because nobody stood up and said, stop. Okay? Just want the council to know, every individual, not one, it should have been stopped. Disagreeing with somebody, that's fine. Not a problem with that. But when you carry it on, then you've overstepped the bounds, and it says if I overstep the bounds, you can have me walked out. Sounds to me like there was some kind of ethics problem taking place.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Mr. Zeus.
Thank you, Mayor Council. I was up here that night during that meeting. I spoke. I watched that DVD more than any of y'all could count. I listened to Dr. Kaiser. The person in question that night have to be discussed. She have to say why not. I don't believe Dr. Kaiser should be subjected to any attacks. The truth, we all got to read the Bible every now and then then the Bible says, dark will come to light. The censure attempt, I believe, and I know, it was orchestrated. It was planned very well. I had a visitor. I tell the truth, the facts, the absolute facts. Nobody will challenge me on it. I had a visitor come to me and sat down. And he says, Mr. Zeus, we know you could do this. I can't. He played an audio for me that shocked me, utterly shocked me, of how well Dr. Kaiser censured is being orchestrated and planned in advance after that evening. I have the proof. But I'm going to tell you, you're going to be shocked to hear it. Everybody that come up here and spoke, look, this is being orchestrated against me when I was a council member. And that failed, being censured. That failed. Then the more per tem incident came up. And I was called the following day on the 13th, I believe, of February. And I was told it was planned for me not to become a mayor pro tem. But I did not have the proof. I had the hearsay. I had that exact individual call me and tell me that. But I want to play something for you. Ms. Dennis or somebody could, I just hooked this up in here. This is, or somebody from IT. What I'm about to play for you is a conversation between the mayor and Mr. Gutierrez of how the censure should take place. And you could hear it yourself. A note was given to Mr. Ralph Gutierrez saying, use it as you need it, and then destroy it. Mr. Gutierrez asked a question. Don't smile, Mr. Gutierrez. It's the truth. I don't lie. He asked him, are we ready? He says, yes. He said, can I make a political statement? He said, yes, as you wish. He said, I want to rub it in. That's orchestrated. I believe that's illegal. So I'll play it for you. You make a decision. Clear, but we'll try it. I guess that. Yeah, I guess.
Next time, I will reserve your seat next time. Mark, you know the problem is, I'm supposed to sit this way. You sit here, so actually, you're an action. Well, once he's sat in that chair, every chair we have available. How long is wrong? I didn't know whose time it was. Oh, because could have been yours. I'm gonna play construction. I like to sausage. Were they in the last closeout at Toys R Us or what?
No, they were in the same toy box as the helmet.
It's like that.
That's why I wear They were in the same toy box as the helmet.
I got my red socks.
Chin straps.
Oh
man, you know what? I'm a crazy sock guy. My daughters told me always be different, Dad. Don't be like everybody else. That's stupid. He told me. Hey, Marcus is a good. They gonna talk about you either way.
My next door neighbor was Ralph's nurse.
Really?
Yeah, Lieutenant Vargas. Great guy. He's actually getting deployed to Korea. Wow. This is going to happen very, very quickly. Please do 3 hours.
3 hours? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the worst part is the nausea after that.
Oh, from the... For you to consider. Don't know what you want to do with it.
At what point can I say it?
When I ask the people if there's anything to put on a future agenda. I'll destroy that then.
Okay. I'm not going to.
Remember last time I asked you not to put that on the agenda yet, but if you wanted to put it on the agenda, no one can object. No one can object.
No one can. Are we ready to put it?
Huh?
Are we ready to put it?
Yeah.
Okay. See, the thing is, I'm not concerned about her comments, you know, but more the retaliation she took for someone that said something during the hearing of residents. It intimidates people to come forward and say what they want to say.
Gotcha.
That's the biggest thing I have been getting. But I will.
Whatever you want to do.
Can I say that based on the new rules to rub it in?
If you want, I probably have to put it on the agenda myself anyway, so if you don't want to make a political statement, then it's fine.
I'll go ahead and put it out.
It's up to you if you want to make.
I think that's enough. It's very embarrassing, it's very disturbing, but I thank you. And hopefully this will be forwarded to law enforcement to investigate if there's any actual crime was committed.
Thank you, sir. Next up, Mr. Greenwald.
Evening, everybody. King Greenwald, 205 Westchester, here in Schertz, since 1972. Anyway, I want to thank the city staff and the city council for being allowed to be the Grand Marshal. Total surprise to me, but I enjoyed it. It was fun. Of course, the rain kind of ruined everything else, but had a half of a day anyway. But I want to thank each and every one of you for, and especially the city staff, for all the work they did to get it set up and get me to ride. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenwald. All right, and last up, Mr. Hayward.
On a different note, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Attorney, City Attorney, Acting Manager, thank you for having me here today. On a different note, I can't vouch for 31 years, but I'm here to talk about Old Wienerstein Road. I know y'all going to discuss that a little later. So with that in mind, I want to commend all of you on the job that you do for being stewards for the city of Schertz and the decisions that you have to make, the strategic decisions that you have to make. Because the decisions you make will impact not only now, but the future of the city of Schertz. And the reason why I'm emphasizing strategic, as a retired military person of nearly 3 decades, I know what it means to make strategic decisions and have other people relying on the decisions that you make. After the military, I went into education for a while. Again, decisions affecting other people. So now I spend my time, for myself and my family, focus on investments. So I know that there are long-term investments and short-term investments. Each of them have consequences. Sometimes you go for the short-term gain, and sometimes you got to do the long-term gain. And I hope that in your decisions as stewards, you're thinking about the long-term gains of what you do with Wienerstein Road. Recently, there was a Guadalupe County planning meeting, and in that meeting, one of the things they unmasked is for the next decade to come, the largest growth between here and Austin will take place between here, Schertz, San Antonio, and Austin. So bear that in mind. That's going to be some of the largest growths that happen. So I hope the decision that you make for Wienerstein Road bears that in mind and is not a short-term idea that you're planning on, and that you be the good stewards. Looking for the future growth, not only now, but the future of the citizens of Schertz, and know that you're establishing a legacy when we're done. Like when I invest for my family, my kids, and my kids' kids, I'm trying to establish a legacy. So I hope when you consider what you do with Wienerstein Road that you're looking for that, the legacy that you're going to leave for the citizens of Schertz. That's all I have. And no one mentioned this. We mentioned the 4th of July parade, but that was great, Independence Day. So I commend the city for what they put on Independence Day parade. That's all.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, the next thing we have on our agenda this evening are the consent agenda items. First thing we have the minutes. Consideration or action regarding the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 26, 2018. Item number 2, Ordinance 18T22, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a budget adjustment to the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget to increase the budget for third-party inspection services, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. Resolution number 18R77, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Resolution 16R38, Committee of Committees Advisory Board, and providing for the purpose, organization, appointment, and duties of the board and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 4, Resolution 18R74, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, approving and authorizing sanitary sewer easement agreements along IH-35 from Michael Scott Turner and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 5, Resolution 18R76, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an agreement to contribute right-of-way funds, fixed price, with the Texas Department of Transportation for the FM 1518 Improvement Project. Item number 6, Resolution 18R78, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, accepting the semi-annual reports with respect to the progress of the capital improvements plan and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 7, Resolution 18R 80, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a program and expenditures as provided for in the Economic Development Performance Agreement between the City of Schertz Economic Development Corporation, the SEDC, and the Kellum Family Medicine Incorporated, the company, and other matters in connection therewith. Item number 8, Resolution 18R79, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acting city manager to enter into an agreement with the Olympia Surgery Center for Ambulance Services. Item number 9, Resolution 18R81, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the acting city manager to enter into an updated agreement with Emirates BHS SA Thousand Oaks for ambulance services. Item number 10, Resolution 18R82, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an amendment to the contract with BB Inspections for inspection and plan review services and expenditures with BB Inspections totaling no more than $460,000 for building inspection services for the fiscal year of 2016-2017 and the fiscal year 2017-2018 and other matters in connection therewith. Any of those items on consent that need to be pulled for individual consideration?
Mayor,
Mr.
I'd like to
Crawford.
pull 6 and 7, please.
Items 6 and 7. Any others? Is there a motion to approve the remainder of the items on consent?
So move.
Second.
I have a motion from Dr. Scagliola, a second from Mr. Davis. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
I have 6 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. The next item on the agenda, going back to items 6 and 7, is item 6, Resolution 18R78, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, accepting the semi-annual reports with respect to the progress of the capital improvements plan and other matters in connection therewith. What do we have there?
Mr. James, when we spoke this morning,
Yes, sir.
could you sort of summarize what we talked about with respect to the planning that's going into these capital improvement projects, as was mentioned a while ago about planning for the future and trying to sort things out?
Yes, sir. No, good point. So for folks in the audience who may not be familiar with what this item is, it's the city collects impact fees for water, sewer, and now road facilities most recently. And we, per state law, are required to do twice-a-year reports, semi-annual reports to council with regard to sort of how much is collected, how much is spent, how much we plan to spend going forward. And so we've been working on improving that form to make it more useful over the last few years. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is with those studies that form the basis of that, they identify improvements for water, sewer, and then for roads that we anticipate need to be built to serve new development going forward. So if we anticipate new development coming in and that's going to trigger us to need an elevated storage tank, then that might be one of the improvements that we would list on that capital report. We have an estimated cost for that. And then those funds that we collect from new development, so whenever folks come in for a building permit on a single-family home, a business, et cetera, we collect that impact fee, and those impact fees can only be used on those identified improvements. What Councilman Crawford and I talked about is that the report lists both some of the unfunded projects that we have. So, for example, the Corbett Elevated Storage Tank, the Corbett Ground Storage Tank, Northeast Distribution Line, Woman Hollering Creek Trunk Line, et cetera. The thing to note is that we estimate with the funds that we have and anticipate to collect on the short term that we will still be short of funds on the order of magnitude approximately $3.3 million for water, $8.5 million for sewer. So impact fees are one source of funds to pay for that, but again, typically for the water and sewer rates go in to help pay for the water and sewer improvements, and then obviously our general taxes go to help pay for roadways as well. So on the one hand, you have new development paying for part of it, and then you have those existing and future residents who come in paying for the other part of it. So I think the key takeaway is impact fees are only one part of it. We don't collect enough to fully pay for those anticipated improvements going forward. So thus we have to look like things for the bond issuance tonight and other sources of funds, our 5-year budgeting forecast, our 30-year model to best plan for those things. And again, as the citizen said, we really need to be good stewards, prioritize those improvements because we're not flush with money. We need to make the most of those.
Thank you.
Anyone else? In that case, is there a motion to approve 18R78?
So be it.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Crawford, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
6 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Next item we have is back to item number 7, which is Resolution 18R80, resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a program and expenditures as provided for in the Economic Development Performance Agreement between the City of Schertz Economic Development Corporation, the SEDC, and the Kellum Family Medicine Incorporated, the company, and other matters in connection therewith. Mr. Crawford, you had a question on this one?
Yes. I had some concerns earlier, but I read everything, and I don't see anything that's changed from what our previous meetings were. So I'm presuming everything is on track, nothing's changed. The concerns are not of any consequence.
So let me try to...
I just want to make sure that I didn't misread anything like when we talked like this morning on some other items.
No, sir. The deal...
Some meetings that have happened since then.
Yes, sir. No, the deal points for the Kellum Medical Project are the same as has been discussed previously. We did have an issue that we caught a couple of errors, a punctuation error, and then, frankly, an incorrect reference subsequent to the Economic Development Corporation approval. And then in developing the council packet and looking at the agreement, there were a couple areas that we kind of felt like weren't as clear as they may have been, and we wanted to correct that. And so in the abundance of caution, and because we've not really discussed this in the past with EDC, we actually pulled EDC back in and wanted to walk them through it, make sure they were okay with it. And then what we will likely do is next meeting talk through them and make sure we're on the same page about here are the sorts of changes that may occur, which ones would need to go back to the board as a policy matter, and which ones don't. Obviously, from a legal perspective, if they need to go back, they need to go back, and it is what it is. But sometimes we err on the side of caution to make sure everybody is on the same page and do it right. Our challenge with EDC is we want to move quickly with some speed because we've got developers waiting on it. So at this point, no, the deal points are as have been discussed, and staff is ready.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions on that one? If not, is there a motion to approve 18R80?
So move.
Second.
A motion from Dr. Scagliola, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I have 4 ayes and 2 nays. The motion carries. Next items that we have on the agenda this evening, we have discussion and action items. Item number 11, Ordinance 18B23. It's a long one. An ordinance authorizing the issuance of City of Schertz, Texas, combination tax and limited pledge revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2018, providing for the payment of said certificates by the levy of an ad valorem tax upon all taxable property within the city, and further securing said certificates by a lien on and pledge of the pledged revenues of the system, providing the terms and conditions of said certificates, and resolving other matters incident and relating to the issuance, payment, security, sale, and delivery of said certificates, including the approval and distribution of an official statement pertaining thereto, authorizing the execution of a paying agent registrar agreement and an official bid form, complying with the requirements of the letter of representations previously executed with the depository trust company, authorizing the execution of any necessary engagement agreements with the city's financial advisors and or bond counsel, and providing an effective date. Sir.
To summarize, the city of Schertz is selling bonds tonight. We're getting approval to go forward with the sale. The city has collected numerous bids. Early this morning, each company, each potential investor pitching some interest rates to us, and here to go through those with you, along with the process, we have Mark McCliney with Samco, who is the city of Schertz's financial advisor.
James, do you want to maybe cover the amount of the bonds and generally what those are for folks?
Yes, sir. The bonds are $10,890,000. This is the culmination of the notice of intent the city issued back at the end of May of this year. About half of those bonds are going to the general fund to purchase a reserve fire engine. We also had some reimbursement resolutions, so we had a couple of projects already underway that will be reimbursed by this money once we get it in. That includes the Pickerel Park pool repair. You notice that we managed to complete the repair earlier this summer and was open by the time the summer started, as well as the YMCA bathroom repair and basically reconstruction. That contract has been awarded, and they're moving forward with that now. Other areas also include replacing all the electronic door locks within the city including areas that previously did not have those will now get those and be much more secure, as well as make some renovations to the, I believe, 11 Commercial Place, which a building the city purchased a few years back, is not up to code. So this will be using these funds to get that ready to have our fleet department move into it.
And to be clear, that we will come back on those items that are sort of broader to council before spending those funds. So again, as we prioritize the building repair money and things like that, we'll come back to council for approval to make sure that we know what we're spending the money on.
And the water and sewer side actually has the other half of the funding, and those projects include some items that were previously mentioned during the budget process, including a couple of loop lines, which are connecting our water and sewer system to each other. So if a main breaks, part of the city doesn't actually lose water, focusing more out south on the loop lines, as well as 1103 utility relocations. So TxDOT's getting ready to start construction further down 1103 on off the bridge. And so to do that, the city of Schertz needs to get in and move its utility lines. And then the final area for the water and sewer side is $4 million identified to go towards replacing our meter reading system. Any other questions? And then we'll go have
go ahead.
Mr. McClining walk you through the bid process and what the results were.
My name is Mark McClining with Samco Capital Markets. It's always good to be here at City of Schertz because I'm normally here giving very good information. This instance is no different. In May, you authorized a notice of intention resolution letting your citizens know that you're going to borrow funds. We went out and advertised the certificates of obligation for sale today at 11 o'clock. Typically, we get great exposure based off our bond ratings. And in the packet, you have the bond ratings. I believe it was talked about being published on your all's website. Your Standard & Poor's rating remains extremely strong. It's the second highest possible rating, AA+. Your Moody's rating is the third highest possible, AA2. These large purchasers of bonds are looking for AA-rated bonds and greater, AAA rated being the highest. There's very, very few AAA-rated bonds out there. So AA is really the sweet spot. We're now getting, in this instance, large enough that the largest buyers on Wall Street are out looking at our bonds. This is new for what we've done in the past. We've always sent the information to them, but it's been too small. They weren't interested until today. If you look at the bid sheet here, at 11 o'clock, we received bids. These are the interest rates that these various firms bid. Morgan Stanley, out of New York, never bid on our bonds before, is the winning bid at 3.19%. Robert Baird has bid and bought bonds from us before. They're the largest municipal bond purchaser in the country, but they're not the largest investment banking firms. We've gotten that we haven't had bids before from Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, JP Morgan, and Merrill Lynch. Now, Bank of America has bought bonds before, but they've merged with Merrill Lynch. And this is the first time Merrill Lynch has come knocking on our doors. It's great exposure. The reason they're bidding is because of your bond rating and what you and the city has done historically managing your finances. It's so important, your fund balance strength, how you've continued to grow, how you continue to bring businesses into the community. It's the leadership of the council. It's how the staff has managed it. We've had long interviews with the rating agencies prior to these sales. All of that information gets digested by these firms, and to have 9 of them bidding for our bonds is a great position to be in. It gives us 2 things. It lets us know that we're doing things correctly. When I say we, the city, it lets us know our finances are in great shape. It lets us know that our advertisement, our word, what we've done in the past is resonating with investment banks and their end customers. We're not just dealing with Texas bond buyers. We've gone from local bond buyers to regional. Now we're finally getting the international investment banks buying our bonds. You all have managed the process, and you continue to do so year after year, and the audit states that. So I'm really pleased with these results, and our recommendation is to award the bonds to Morgan Stanley and Company out of New York City. With that, I would like to, these chicken scratch that I wrote on, we ran the numbers at 4.5% because the Fed has continued to raise rates. We didn't want to get behind the 8 ball and then promise something to you and your staff and not be able to deliver. We ended up at 319. The difference in interest costs is $1.6 million, lower savings or lower interest payments. So that, of course, nets to the bondholders. To the taxpayers. I would point out, James went through the projects being general fund and utility fund. It's structured so the utility fund covers the utility fund portion of the project, and the taxpayers, the INS tax rate will cover the general fund portion of it. So we're not commingling funds and paying for them. They have their own distinct debt service schedule, so it stays segregated. With that, I'll address any questions that you all have, but this was a terrific result for the city.
Any questions? All right, if there aren't any questions, is there a motion to approve Ordinance 18B23?
So move.
Second.
Excuse me, Mayor, there's a particular motion that needs to be read.
There is, and I apologize, Mr.
That's
Gutierrez, I'm going to hand this down to you, and in the red is what our bond counsel has said we have to use state-mandated language.
I move to adopt an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a City of Schertz, Texas Combination Tax and Limited Pledge Revenue Certificate of Obligation Series 2018.
All right, that's our motion.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Gutierrez, a second from Mr. Davis. Any other comments or questions from council? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 6 ayes, no nays, the motion carries. All right, thank you. The next one that we have the item number 12, potential certificates of obligation and general obligation refunding. And it reads, Samco Capital Markets, City's financial advisor, proposes to receive bids and present final savings for the council's consideration at the regularly scheduled meeting on November 13th, 2018. Staff recommends authorizing city staff and consultants to proceed with the potential refunding of the city's aforementioned COs and bonds if certain debt service savings can be achieved. All right.
Mayor and Council, Samco and Mark McCliney have brought to our attention a potential refunding upcoming in the near months, and he will go over which bonds are eligible for refunding and why we have to wait until October to do so due to some recent changes in how we can issue refunding bonds.
Thank you, James. These are a lot more fun to bring to council. This is taking your existing debt, paying it off, and issuing bonds at lower interest rates. Prior to December 31st, 2017, we would have done this months ago or today with this authorization. But the tax law changed things. Cities can no longer advance refund bonds. An advance refunding is when you refund bonds 90 days, greater than 90 days prior to the call date. When you sell bonds, we put a call date where we can take the bonds from the investor at an agreed upon day without a penalty. Prior to the tax law, we could issue tax-exempt bonds, put the money into an escrow prior to that 90 days, and then wait until the call date to take them from the investor. The tax law changed that, so we have to do it within a 90-day window of the call date. We're looking at refunding 3 bonds. There's Certificates of Obligation Series 2007. It's up there on the very top. General Obligation and Refunding Bond Series 2009. And then a General Obligation Refunding Bond Series 2010. The largest of the bonds is the $4,705,000, which is the Series 2009. And you'll see that call date is February 1st, 2019. 90-day window has to fall between November 1st and February 1st. So what we're going to show on the next page is selling in October, if you all authorize us to proceed. Simply put, looking at the bottom projected annual savings, after all expenses, we expect to save approximately $780,000. That's after all expenses. So that's net to the city. Roughly speaking, $60,000 in the earlier years, down to about $50,000 on the latter years. It's going to be split between the general fund and the utility fund, because some of these bonds are being paid for from the utility fund. And we, again, back to what we were saying earlier, utility fund items get paid for by the utility fund, general fund items get paid for by the general fund. This bar down here, 9.45%. We typically think if it's greater than 5%, it's worth grabbing. It's savings worth grabbing, and this is almost double that. So our recommendation is to proceed on this refunding and come back to you in October with final interest rates. And if you look at the next page, it's the timetable. It shows a lot of work that we will be doing with staff, but it would have us coming back October 23rd to City Council. We would receive bids just like we did this morning. We'd come back in the evening at your council meeting on October 23rd. We would close, deliver funds November 14th, which of course falls within the 90-day window, and then we'll be able to call these bonds on their respective call dates in November at closing, the ones that are currently callable, and then we'd hold the money until February for the larger of them, which is the 2009. We wanted to bring this to your attention, get authority to proceed. Nothing is issued until it's back to you as a council. This just gives us the ability to go out and sell the bonds subject to council approval. We would do it just like we did with the COs. If the savings don't materialize to where we think they are, we'll either come in with a recommendation not to proceed, or you can come say, that's not savings worth proceeding. So we'll know generally a week beforehand if interest rates have gone higher than what we're expecting, where it's not worth proceeding, and we'd report back to you at the council meeting that because of interest rates, which are of course out of our control, savings are down to $400,000 and it's below the 5% threshold, we don't think it's worth pursuing. Now, the interest rates we ran today were Schertz's bond sale earlier today plus 20 basis points. So we're using today's rates and adding 20 basis points higher in case the Fed starts moving quicker and the market moves against us, that we have some leeway in there. So I believe we're going to be conservative enough to be able to deliver what we're showing, but the market could move quicker and move against us, and it could be less. And at that point, council will make a decision, yes, $600,000 is worth grabbing, or it's only down to $200,000 and that is way below the threshold, and we would come in and say, we don't recommend proceeding. With that, I'll answer any questions that you all may have, but it does appear to be a very good and attractive refunding, and we'd like to be able to take this out to bid and bring it back to you in October.
All right, council questions? You're just basically looking for assent from council this evening, or are you looking for an actual vote?
If you just give us consent, that's fine. I don't need a formal.
Okay.
I'm looking at how there's not. I knew there was no resolution. It's consideration and/or action. If If you all believe it makes sense to proceed, I'll just go ahead and proceed.
Okay, very good. Council questions? Mr. Crawford?
Is there any problem voting so we have a consensus by vote, or?
Not at all. I mean, we are listed for consideration or action, so it's perfectly reasonable and within the rules to make a motion.
The other question, what you're alluding to is the market could make this kind of go away. If the interest rates get higher, then...
In theory, yes, sir.
That's
If
the
interest
only...
rates, the Fed's raised interest rates twice this year. They're talking about 2 more and 3 times next year. The Fed controls short-term interest rate, and the market controls interest rates after the short term.
Yep.
So if the market thinks inflation is taking off, interest rates are going to go higher than what we're projecting. Now, we're already projecting higher than they are today. I don't think we're going to go that high, but the business decision will come back to you all with a number that says this is not worth pursuing.
Thanks.
Very good. Anyone else? Yeah. Mr. Crawford, do you want to make a motion?
I'd like to make the motion, yes, sir. I make a motion we approve the potential certificate of obligation and general obligation refunding, and we'll review that again on the 23rd of October, I guess.
Is it 23rd? 23rd, yes, sir.
All right, is there a second? I have a motion, Mr. Crawford, second, Dr. Kaiser. Any other comments, questions for council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I got 6 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you, sir.
We'll see you back in October.
All right, next item that we have on the agenda this evening is roll call vote confirmation. Mrs. Dennis?
Consent agenda items 1 through 5 and 8 through 10. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 6, resolution number 18R78. A motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 7, resolution number 18R80. A motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson voted yes. Councilmembers Kaiser, Crawford voted no. Motion passed. Item number 11, ordinance number 18B23, first and final reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Gutierrez, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 12, motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Kaiser to proceed with the potential refunding and to come back in November. Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. All right, next up we have a workshop, presentation and discussion for staff on recommendations of the Unified Development Code, or UDC, regarding standards for sheds, and the item requested by Mr. Davis.
Good evening, and Mayor and members of council. We have several staff members here this evening to discuss this topic. Emily Grobe from our Community Development Department and Assistant Chief Kyle McAfee from the Fire Department will be making a presentation regarding this issue and kind of how we got to where we are today. And then we have staff here for any questions and discussion that may occur after.
Okay, good evening. Like Mr. Waite said, my name is Emily. I'm with the Planning Division, and this is Assistant Chief. And we are going to talk to you about the standards for accessory structures, specifically residential sheds. So to start off, just as a kind of refresher, maybe an update, our current UDC requirement for Article 8 for accessory buildings, uses, and structures Specifically, the separation distance requirements states that accessory buildings shall be set back 3 feet from common property lines and 10 feet from the main building. So just to kind of clear that up, you have your property line, you have to be 3 feet off of that, and your main structure, you have to be 10 feet from your main building. This code requirement actually predates our very first Unified Development Code. It's actually, from the research that we did, we found that it was originally put in the 1974 zoning ordinance, which basically had the same requirements: no closer than 10 feet to the main building and no closer than 3 feet to that property line. So kind of why we're here, the reason for this discussion tonight, code enforcement received a complaint listing multiple addresses that were believed to have accessory structures in violation of that separation requirement. Code enforcement did evaluate and send notice of violations to those 4 property owners, all of which were in the Fairways of Scenic Hills community. After those notice of violations went out, city staff did meet with those property owners, talked about the code requirements, if there was, any mitigating factors or anything like that, and they did decide to proceed forward with a variance application. The Board of Adjustment heard the 4 variance cases on June 25th at our last month's meeting. Essentially, the variance was to those 2 code requirements in order for them to keep the residential structure that they had installed. City staff did make a recommendation of denial, stating that none of the cases proved a legal hardship could not be determined, and that the code requirement was in place for life safety concerns. The BOA did end up denying all 4 of the variance cases. Since then, city staff has received a list of additional addresses believed to have sheds in violation of those requirements. So far, we've received 13 properties that appear to have sheds in violation. 7 of the properties did not obtain permits. So just as a caveat, in February of 2016, we did adopt an ordinance exempting sheds with a floor area of 120 square feet or less. They no longer had to come in and obtain a permit, but they were still required to meet all of the rest of the UDC requirements, specifically, like I had mentioned before, those 2 separation requirements. Out of those 13, 6 properties did have permits issued. With at least one of those 6 properties, it appears that the permit was issued incorrectly in 2007. The 4 residents that did request the variances installed their sheds in late 2017, early 2018, so they weren't required to come in and pull permits. So kind of moving past the code requirement, why we're here today, let's talk about the interpretation of this requirement. We feel that it was originally adopted by the city to address life safety concerns related to fire. Just as a side note, the 10-foot separation between a single-family home and a shed is a local code out of the UDC, but it's not a requirement out of the International Fire Code or the International Residential Code. From the planning side, we look at the separation as more of the in general setback requirements. Typical residential lot setbacks provide for a more open, inviting atmosphere, that kind of warm community, if you will. However, when we looked at this particular code requirement, we do think it is in place more for the fire concerns more than the aesthetics of that open setback requirement.
The fire department's main concern, Emily mentioned, is life safety, and we approach that from two aspects: access and the limiting the spread of fire. So as far as access, if we have we've got a 10-foot setback, firefighters have to have room to work in between structures. We have to be able to not only work in between the structure, but also gain access to the rear of a structure should we have to enact a rescue or extinguish a fire on the rear of the structure. As far as limiting fire spread from structure to structure is the number 4 cause in the nation of a home fire in a residential structure. And we believe that having this separation between structures helps limit those numbers in the city of Schertz. Their citizens will get up here and they'll say that we've only had 4 of these fires in the last 3 years. And that's right. And I would contend that there's a reason why we only have 4 of these fires is because we have a code in place that limits the possibility of the spread of these fires. I think that's...
So we're here. We also have members of code enforcement. If there's any questions, we're going to just kind of start the general discussion about this requirement.
Question from the council.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I asked for this to be on the agenda. I've got some concerns about this. I understand the concerns of the city, but I keep on going back to thinking about things along the lines that, and we talked about this last meeting or so when we talked about roofing and permits for roofs, where we add an extra burden on our residents with an extra inspection that's typically not required. We had a discussion in the past about sheds, and we've talked about why we should or should not have people do permits for sheds of a certain size. We've modified our UDC for that. My concern is we have an issue up north where someone's put a shed adjacent to their property. And I don't want to discount the life safety concern, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around that as the justification for putting this in our UDC. I've sat up here where we've had other discussions about adopting the official life safety code, and we do that for a reason. And to me, if it's important enough, it would be in the building code or the life safety code or the National Fire Code. And to go beyond that and put an additional burden on a property owner or an additional limitation and telling them what they can and cannot do on their property, I think at times we're sort of overstepping our bounds. Again, I don't want to discount the fire department's concerns. I played as a firefighter for 12 years in 3 different states, and I know what the potential hazards are for fire spread. I grew up in a community where we had row homes, an entire block of buildings side by side. So I do know about fire spread going from structure to structure. But that does not in itself necessarily mean that we have to over-legislate and overly restrict everything. There is certainly a requirement for not doing something in an easement. That's why we have an easement, and that's in the code. There is definitely a requirement for firefighter access, but again, that's why you have an easement. I'm just not convinced that telling someone that they can't put an auxiliary structure right up against their house is the right way to go. There's just too many that would end up happening across the city. I mean, everywhere you go to Lowe's, go to Home Depot, you see these polyvinyl ones that are designed to sit somewhere. Most people set them right up against their house. I've taken the liberty of driving around the city and have seen more than, and I see the code compliance guys doing the north and south, I've seen plenty of structures out there up against a residence that, even though it's been in our UDC, it doesn't look like we've been actively enforcing it ever. So now we've got a bunch of people that, because of another situation, are called into the view for this. We suggested them to ask for a variance. They go through the effort to make a variance, and then we turn around and say, no, we're not going to give you a variance. Are we going to go down the path where now we're going to just get more and more people that are in violation of something that is, for all intents and purposes, self-inflicted by the city because there's no building code or standard that talks about that? I've been down the fire department's route. I understand the concern. I understand the risk. You can't legislate all the risk away from property owners. If someone's going to do something to their property that's going to cause a problem, it's going to happen, and that's why we buy fire trucks and have a paid fire department and build fire station number 3. Again, this came out of a discussion about an auxiliary structure up adjacent to the primary structure. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. I live in a house that is brick on 3 sides. And to me, the thought of not being able to put a structure, a shed or a small storage unit, right next to my brick wall because of a fire risk, yet I have my lawnmower in my garage, which is in my primary structure and right underneath my master bedroom. To me, I've got a more risk going on right now in my current structure with the cleaning materials and lawnmower and other stuff that I've got in my garage. That would be less of a risk as a property owner if I moved it outside, even if that auxiliary structure was right up against my primary structure. So, I mean, I asked that question on there because I wonder what kind of resolution or accommodation we can offer to our residents, and more importantly, how do we go forward with this where, again, it takes 1 or 2 to be non-compliant with something that is of the city's own creation that leads to, well, you're not letting me do it, but my neighbor has it, so let me call the city about my neighbor. And then that neighbor calls the city about their neighbor. And it just goes on and on forever. And then again, the reality of it is, if you look at the rest of the city and we have other people that are non-compliant, what are we going to do about it? If we're going to hold the people in the north non-compliant that we know about them, are we now going to go out and start knocking on doors and finding other people and holding them accountable? So again, I think if it's something that's in the building code and we've adopted the building code, I understand that. And that's a published code by professionals that make life and safety and building and construction recommendations for the public at large. But I think going beyond that is an area that we should tread very lightly and not necessarily over-legislate against our property owners in our community.
Mr. Larson?
I don't want anything to get to Mr. Davis's head, but on this particular agenda item, he's my hero. I will say, I guess, and some of these are loaded questions. I don't mean them to be other than just to see if I'm thinking incorrectly. But if this particular fire safety requirement is not based on the International Fire Code, what research or documentation is it based on?
The 10-foot setback?
Yes, sir.
Sir, I wasn't here when those were determined, but I know there is data out there that shows that fire, the radiated heat from a fire intensifies at the power of 4 by the foot. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure how they came up with 10 feet, but I know that for every foot you get away from a structure, you decrease the temperature exponentially by 4 times. Understood.
And do we know what our rules are related to the distance between primary structure and a fence would be? Because I know my home in that I'm living at in older Schertz, there's definitely not a 10-foot separation there. Do we know what that requirement is?
So honestly, it kind of varies. So most of the zoning districts currently now have a 10-foot setback requirement for the side yards. But if you were platted many years ago, you might have had 5 feet, you might have had 7.5 feet. Through the span of time, through the UDC, we went from 5 feet, 7.5 feet, to now the 10 feet.
And maybe to be clear, Emily, on that question, typically people build the fence on the property line, and so it's your setback, the distance from the house to the property line is what most folks build. I'm not aware of obviously if somebody walked in and said, I'm choosing to build a fence closer to my house, I don't think we have a code that prohibits you from doing that. And obviously where the fence comes up to typically the front of the house, it comes across and is directly adjacent to the house. But I don't know that we have a requirement, which was your question, to keep it a minimum distance.
I guess just to echo many of Mr. Davis's sentiments, I think the International Fire Code, I would imagine, is a relatively conservative document in terms of erring on the side of being overly cautious. Perhaps I'm making an assumption that's not true there. And when we look at, you said 6 of them have permits. Those 6 are within the 10-foot range?
So from the Google aerial, research that has been completed, it appears that they are in violation of either the 3 feet from the property line or 10 feet from the main structure. Unfortunately, besides the one that we know was issued in error, the other 5, we cannot find the documentation to say if the shed was permitted in a different location and then was moved closer to the home, but the other 5 are still open.
So 2 of those permits were actually issued, and there were exhibits with them that show the shed was supposed to be located in the rear yard. So they are actually located in the wrong location. And the other 3 didn't. They submitted the documentation, but I can't see any exhibits with them, and it appears that they didn't call for their final inspection. So at this point, there's been no final inspection. So the location, unless we actually just go out and physically take a photo of it.
Which wouldn't be required anymore because we don't require permitting.
Not anymore. However, prior to 2016, a permit was required, and so it was a requirement. The permit expired after 180 days.
So maybe Lisa, if this helps, going to the councilman's point, there are probably sheds out there that were built not in conformance with the permit that were issued, and that's why they're in violation. But there probably are more than just the one that we incorrectly issued a permit, maybe even gone out, inspected it, and said, that one looks good, you're good to go, and cut it loose. We probably have that circumstance.
All right, thank you. I will echo the sentiments. I think this might be an overly burdensome, unnecessary part of our UDC. I kind of agree, and I mean, my garage is a 90% converted to a room with a maybe 2 feet deep garage, and in that, just thinking off the top of my head, I know of at least 2 gas cans that I have stored in there, among other lighter fluid, probably 2 lighter fluids because I probably opened one and lost one and then bought another one and put it in there. And I think, we do have too much stuff, right? We have too much stuff that we need to get storage for our stuff that we don't use anymore. But it is a need that we have, and I'd like to see going the other way on this, and maybe realizing that storage is a need, and we have plenty of regulations that concern the aesthetic of those particular storage buildings. It looks like it's a 40-year-old code that's not even requested in International Fire Code. I would imagine in those 40 years there's been advancements in technology of the materials for which most sheds are created. I would imagine many of those advancements are related to the flammability of the materials used for those sheds. And so I'd like to see maybe the city taking time to walk away from this particular regulation and maybe easing the burden on our residents.
Anyone else? Mr. Davis.
Yeah, again, especially when we talk about some of these property lines, I mean, if we have to have a 3-foot easement from the property line, which I think is important because of utilities, and we have to have some kind of allowance for public safety officials to get around and into these areas. But if you have a 3-foot easement on the property line and a 10-foot from the primary structure, you're already 13 feet. And if we said you don't even need a permit for a 10 by 10 structure, I mean, most of these properties that you have, you're looking at 23 feet now at minimum to be able to put one on the side, 10 feet off your house, then a 10-foot structure, then 3 feet off the property line. And with some of these lot sizes that we have in the community, I think we're turning around and saying, look, you really don't have many options other than sticking it in your backyard, which may or may not be feasible depending on what's in your backyard, like trees. And I can see it now where someone says, I really want to put a shed in my backyard, but my only option is to cut down a tree, and then we'll turn around and give them a tree mitigation fee for cutting down their tree. So, I mean, I think this is worth discussion. I really wouldn't mind, this is not for action tonight, but I really wouldn't mind having this specific part of the UDC on the agenda in the near future for a possible action.
Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, this is going to shock a lot of people, but yeah, I do agree with Councilmember Larson and Davis in this. It needs to be looked at. Like Councilmember Davis said, my house is made out of brick also. I mean, I had some of that nasty R111, which goes up like a powder puff, but I replaced all that with the Hardy plank. According to USAA, the value of my house went up about $25,000, $30,000 when I did that. If I'd known then what I know now, but the house is safer. It's more insulated. Brick on the outside, pretty much fireproof. I think part of the problem with this is the HOA doesn't allow sheds to be built in the backyard because they abut the golf course. And to the best of my knowledge, the golf course doesn't have a problem with this. It's the HOA that has a problem with it. I'd like, and what I recommended when this was brought to my attention, talk to the HOA. Get the rules changed for the HOA. How many problems would that alleviate? Would it alleviate them all? Well, not necessarily. But I do think that I don't want to stand in the way of safety. I really don't. You know, how many houses need to burn down? How many is too many? One, in my view. You know, I don't want to run that risk. But let's keep safety in mind. If we go back and revisit this UDC, can we come up with a policy or a process that would maybe be a win-win? Take care of the needs of the residents and ensure our homes are still safe. That's my view. That's all I have, sir.
All right, anyone else?
I believe staff can certainly look at that, and we'll go back and come to you with some alternatives.
All right, very good. Thank you.
If I may, Mayor, and again, I apologize for this, but I think, as I mentioned from last council meeting, I think these things are extremely helpful for staff. And what I think we want to do is not misstep as we come forward, that we misunderstand the general consensus on the part of council. And so I'd certainly appreciate some feedback on the comments that we've got. We've got a couple ways we could go with this. One is we could eliminate the 10-foot separation requirement from the primary structure in general. So maintain the 3 foot from a property line, which means you can't put it right up kind of by your neighbors, away from your own, if you will, a little bit. Has some restrictions there. The other thing is we could simply eliminate both of those, and that would allow the shed to be right up on the property line, in between houses, things like that. What I might suggest, though, is, you know, because it's a UDC amendment, we will run this, it has to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation. At times, what I think we like to do, because sometimes it's not an all or nothing, is maybe we can come up, if council's okay, with a range of potential code amendments, likely even 4 or 5. Some, at one extent, would be we eliminate the 3 foot, we eliminate 10 feet. The other end may be something we do where, you know, fire's concern on this is primarily 2 reasons. One is the concern for the property owner that it catches fire and it catches the primary structure. And again, we heard some comments about at some point people take a certain amount at their own risk. The other is with regard to ingress and egress on the side of the house for the firefighters who are having to deal with something. And, you know, we had a lot of conversations about all the stuff that gets put there now, be it bicycles or RVs or air conditioner units, things like that. And maybe that's not an all or nothing. Maybe we preserve an adequate pathway for the firefighters. It would allow some of the sort of narrow sheds up against the house, but if you want sort of the 10 by 10, you'd put it not in the side yard, if you will, but behind the house. And so maybe what we come back with are 4 or 5 different options. We kind of walk through the pros and cons of those. It may be useful that we go through a broader process of input at the Planning and Zoning Commission to see kind of what the community wants. And then we have sort of a menu board of options that come back to council that you can sort of weigh going forward with that if that's the desire of council. But I mean this sincerely. If council feels very confidently it's kind of not in the fire code, we've kind of overstepped, let's get rid of it, I think that's the direction we'd like to hear so we don't spend a bunch of time and energy on something that we've misunderstood. And so the thumbs up was to the just take it out part and come back? Okay. Okay. Then with that, we will move forward accordingly.
All right. Thank you, staff. All right, next up we have discussion and update regarding the Wiederstein Road and Old Wiederstein Road project. And Mr. Crawford asked this to be on the agenda. Mr. James, do you have anything to preface this with, or do you just want Mr. Crawford to... Mr. Crawford?
Okay, Brian. I'm going to make my comments as per we discussed this morning, and you can update as you did to me twice today. So 2 weeks ago, I'm making this to the audience and to my fellow council members. 2 weeks ago, we talked about this. The mayor and I talked about it before the council meeting, and I was asking the mayor, could we consider deeding the road, Wiederstein Road, not Old Wiederstein Road, but Wiederstein Road, to the city of Schertz, to the city of Cibolo, and in the deed restrictions have our curb cuts. It's a city street. It's not a county road or a state TxDOT road, so we have control of it right now. And we would get our curb cuts as we needed for our development on the north, what I would call the northeast side of Wiederstein Road. And that would avoid us having to pay $1 million to the city of Cibolo, which is under discussion now. I don't have any problem paying the city of Cibolo $1 million in lieu of giving them the road, to the extent of a couple of things. Number one, we have to borrow the $1 million, or we have to take it out of general revenue. So that's a choice we can make. What I was trying to do is have the money be available for us to work on other projects, our roads in other parts of the city. I don't have any problem with the mayor wanting to keep control, because you never know what's going to happen when you give up control of something. But I just wanted to make it public to the council again. That $1 million is probably a fair number to give the city of Cibolo. The developer says it'll cost $4.6 million to fix Wiederstein Road. We may have 20% traffic coming off Wiederstein Road from the city of Schertz. Correct, Ryan? Probably less right now, but it's going to be a little bit more.
Those are the numbers we kind of
it's a ballpark number. So $1 million over $4.6 million is a little less than, a little more than 20%. So not a bad number to start with. So my comments are just to formally make the comment again about, if we didn't have to give that $1 million to the city of Cibolo, and they got the road, and their developer's going to fix the road, we would have $1 million we could borrow to do some of our other roads, or anything else that made sense for the city. We've got a long list of things we need to do. So not trying to fight with the mayor or the city manager. Ron and I talked about this several times. I was willing to pull this from the agenda, except that because I didn't want to mess up what Brian's negotiating with Mr. Herrera. But I want everybody to know that I was concerned about how we spend our $1 million, or how we spend our money, and we need to get the road fixed. So either way, it's going to work. But it's a question of, where does the money come from? Is control that important? And that's not my decision alone. So I've said my story, and you can give the update, Brian, and unless council wants to take it for action and talk about giving the road to the city of Cibolo, other than council wanting to do something as a body, I made my comments just because I felt they need to be made. Thank you.
Very good. Any other council members have any comments? Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I know this is a contentious issue for both communities. I understand the urgency for Cibolo and their desire to make improvements to this particular road. I also understand where this particular road racks and stacks with all the efforts that we've done on our pavement condition index and our road plan improvements. Within the past month, I've had a couple residents call me and ask me about road improvements, and none of the roads they called and asked me about were named Wiederstein. So we have conflicting priorities here. There are a couple ways to look at it. One is Schertz can step to the plate and take this project on. I don't think that's the right answer. Schertz can sit back and do nothing. I don't think that's the right answer. It was interesting to hear about the potential for a deed maneuver. That is different. I don't think Cibolo, for as much as what I've heard on social media and from other folks, Cibolo may not be happy with the thought of a 3-to-1 payment option to make improvements to Wiederstein. But their alternative is they can pay for it entirely or wait. So, I mean, it's not exactly the ideal situation for them, and it's not the ideal situation for us. I'd be interested in, we have other options available. Again, the deed option is interesting. If we could do a deed and put restrictions in that deed where it meets our needs in the future, it solves a problem for us where we don't have maintenance going forward, and we have no out-of-pocket now. I think financially that's the different direction that Cibolo was hoping for. I really would like to hear more input from officially the Cibolo side of the house. We had received a letter in the past asking for a joint meeting with their council. And in talking about that, I was convinced that having a joint meeting with their council was not the way to go, because it's just going to be 7 council members, and I don't know how many they got, 7? 7 on our side, 7 on their side, with 14 different opinions, which means nothing's going to get accomplished. So I agree that having that meeting in the past may not have been the best idea, but it may get to the point now where maybe it's time to have that discussion and then put the cards on the table and see which way we go forward for this.
Mr. Gutierrez?
There's a reason why TxDOT wants the right-of-way on 1518. It's very important that we keep our curve cuts wherever we want them, whatever businesses want to come into either side. We forget that Schertz owns 3 portions of that corridor right there on 35. This giving the road to Cibolo, I just think is not the right way to go. Even if we give it to them, they will add restrictions. All of a sudden, we have to abide by their restrictions and make it impossible for us to even do the curve cuts. It's just a bad choice. We have to keep the road in Schertz so that we can control what we want on that road and on those intersections.
Dr. Scagliola?
Yeah, about the only problem I have with deeding anything over to somebody is what happens when they default. There's almost absolutely no way to force them to do something other than take them to court. I'm not in favor of turning over City of Schertz property to anybody. And quite frankly, I've got an exceptional relationship with the council members and the mayor over in Cibolo. And they know I'm willing to work with them. I've proven it in the past. And this issue really hasn't come up with any of the individuals I've spoken with. I know the Forbes property, it's an appetizing piece of property right now, and it will be developed. Okay, we may be out $1 million initially, but when that property is fully developed, I believe we'd have the potential to recoup that $1 million plus a whole lot more once that area is developed. We talked about changing the name of the street. Quite frankly, Cibolo Valley Drive doesn't offend me at all. I think, as the mayor said, we have 3 different Wiedersteins in the city, and none of them connect. Going from Wiederstein to Old Wiederstein and then going to Chelsea, which is out in my neck of the woods. I know the area quite well. I'm not territorial, but deeding a road over to another city would, in my mind, almost landlock that piece of the property to the city of Schertz. We've made deals with Cibolo in the past. We gave them access to 3009. People wonder, well, why? That's Cibolo over there? Yeah, that's Cibolo. They wanted access to 3009. We provided them access to I-35. We did that. I don't believe it's time to give the property back to them totally. As I said, I'm willing to work with our friends in Cibolo. I've proven that time and time again. What I suggest is we let the city managers who are speaking directly with the developers, determine what the best course of action is. I have the utmost respect to Mr. James, Cibolo City Manager. They're good people. They know what their councils are after, what they want to accomplish. Let them take first swipe at it. Hey, bring us a plan. If we like it, we'll go for it. That's all I have, sir.
Very good. Any others? Okay, I would just ask that the process that has already begun, when Mr. James came to us and shared the letter that we got from the city of Cibolo with their suggestion as to what might be a viable answer, and it was presented to the council, and the council said, well, go have the conversation, see what can be negotiated, and then bring it back to us. And I would just ask the council to wait for that to be done. Let's see what comes back to us from the city of Cibolo and the conversations that Mr. James is having with Mr. Herrera. And at that time, we'll have an opportunity to consider what's before us, and we can vote for it or vote against it at that point. All right. Anything else on this one?
Mr. James is brief.
Mr. Crawford.
I said my comments. I'm ready for a brief on what's going on.
Sure. So with regard to what is going on, since the presentation at council that the direction was generally positive, I've had a number of conversations with Mr. Herrera, about that. He still is agreeable to the deal as was laid out to council, which is essentially the city of Schertz kicking in $1 million to the section of Wiederstein from 35 to Old Wiederstein, as well as the commitment of up to $500,000 from both cities to try to leverage those funds to make intersection and overpass improvements within the TxDOT right-of-way, if you will. Again, as the citizen said, there was some residents spoke at Cibolo City Council, to be blunt, not feeling like that was a good deal. I think a lot of that comes from the perspective you look at why we're in the situation that we're in and why things are what they are. So Mr. Herrera has indicated that he's still supportive of that in terms of a deal going forward, working on pulling together the draft of an ILA for that to get to him. And again, the game plan is to try to get that back here to you on the 24th, and I'd assume probably get to their council at the same meeting. I'm not sure either one of us has a lot of concerns that if one council approves it and the other doesn't, that creates an issue. Better to kind of move it forward quickly, and if one side has a problem, then one side has a problem with it, and we'll kind of come back to the drawing board. He and I don't read minds, and positions change and things like that. It was, he and I both agreed that it was a deal we each could support to our council, and we felt like had merits with our council, which I think this one does, whether others do as well. So at this point, we anticipate having the interlocal agreement laying out that under the terms we talked about previously for you on the 24th to go forward. So if there's a concern to do something different or an openness for something, again, as with the last item, it's probably helpful for me to kind of understand that, to not misstep or to not spend a bunch of time and energy going forward.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything else on this one? All right. Thank you, council. All right. Next items that we have on the agenda this evening, we have item number 13, City Council meet in closed session under Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code, personnel matters to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of the city manager. And item 14, City Council meet in closed session under Texas Government Code, Section 551.071, consultation with the city attorney, and Section 551.074, personnel matters to deliberate a complaint about the evaluation, duties, or discipline of a city council member. You may notice that Mr. Edwards is not here this evening. I have a note from Mr. Edwards saying that he apologizes. He's out to handle some family business, and asks if we would not take up item number 14 this evening in his absence. I asked Mr. Gutierrez if he was amenable to that. He said he was. So it's up to the council as to whether or not we want to proceed forward or go along with Mr. Edwards' request. So if there's not objection, then we won't take that up this evening. Also, with item number 13, it's been our habit not to take this one up when we don't have a full council present. However, we could go and begin discussion, but the habit has been full council when we discuss potentially filling the city manager's role. If I don't have objection from council, then I would wait for Mr. Edwards to return. It doesn't look like I have any objections, so we'll make that accommodation for him since he's unable to be here. All right, so there's no need for item 13A or 14A. Roll call vote confirmation, no need for that one either. Next item we have a request and announcements. We have announcements by the acting city manager, Mr. James.
None, sir.
Next item, request by the mayor and council members that items be placed on a future city council agenda. Having none, we'll move to announcements by the mayor and Mr. Crawford.
All right. I'd like to put on the agenda a discussion and with the staff about, I had a resident call me about the fact that his neighbor parked in front of his mailbox all the time and he couldn't get his mail delivered. And Mr. James and I have talked about that. The chief and I talked about it, and the chief said, we don't have anything that, we have any kind of a city ordinance that says we can do anything to somebody who consistently parks in front of your mailbox. You might want to bring it up at council. I checked with the chief again tonight, and he was still comfortable with that choice. I talked to Mr. James this morning, so I'd like to have that on the agenda at some point to comply with my citizens' request and discuss it. It may not be anything we can do, but we need to find out.
Get that for us, Mr. James.
And if I may, Mayor, if there's not an objection from council, I think what I understood is the typical process on this one would be to vet that through TSAC.
Right.
Unless council feels the need to discuss that first, my thought would be to take that concept to TSAC. They've certainly dealt with parking in front of
That's fine.
mailboxes before, and then see where they go and then bring that forward at that point.
So make it be, go to TSAC, and then they can let us know what they recommend and such. That'd be fine. Thank you.
Very good. All right, announcements of the mayor and council members, and we'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Scagliola.
I like that Mr. Greenwald stood up here in the beginning and thanked us for making him the marshal for the day. It's an honor greatly deserved, sir. Thank you so very much. The 4th of July parade was absolutely wonderful. Really nice weather, great weather for a parade. Okay, turn a little south towards the end of the day, but we'll save those fireworks for another time. Something Mr. Greenwald mentioned was he used to drive us around in the fire truck, 1956. I know the date because that's when I was born. It's an old truck, but quite frankly, that thing I think might be in better shape than I am, even to this day. And he proposed to raise some money to get that fire truck fixed. Loved riding around in it. And he was willing to write a check for $500. He's looking for donations. I think price tag somewhere around $20,000 to get it fixed. Is that about right, Mr. James?
Or to Mr. Wade,
yeah, okay.
Is it more than that, Mr. Wade, or is that
20 would get us well down the road to having it in really good parade condition.
That is awesome. I highly encourage people to contribute to such a worthwhile fund. I will write a check as well. And, budget talks are coming up. I can't tell the council how to spend the city's money, but, matching funds, we've done that sort of thing in the past. It might be something worth considering during budget talks. Once again, thank you so much for the staff. It was a wonderful event. Hope to be around next year, riding in that big red fire truck. That's all I have, sir.
Very good. Mr. Davis?
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to all the staff and everyone that participated in putting the 4th of July parade together. Great job.
Very good. Mr. Larson?
Nothing.
Dr. Kaiser? Mr. Crawford?
Thanks to all the staff for the 4th of July parade. That's all.
Mr. James?
Just on Councilman Scagliola's comment, one of the things that that council has mentioned in the past, I believe, had to do with making it easier for folks to make donations to the city of Schertz. I have seen a draft of the work done by IT Public Affairs and the Finance Department to allow online donations to things. We've even vetted a number of different things that folks would likely want to donate for. So we will add the fire engine repair to that. And no pun intended, I will light a fire under IT and finance and public affairs to see if we can get that up and running in a matter of a couple weeks. And then we can start promoting that in the magazine and things like that.
Very good. And for me, I'd also want to thank the staff for doing a great job on the Jubilee Parade. And Mr. James, I think that we didn't have a rain out of the fireworks themselves, just of the place really where we launched them from. And the fireworks are safe, and we're going to use those, I think you told me, in September as we celebrate the city's 60th birthday. So more to come on that, and we'll bring it forward. Anything else from staff or from council? If not, then we stand adjourned.